Hey there, internet friends. Welcome back to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, please remember to subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Doing another solo episode today, as has become a little bit of a tradition. I'm going to Disneyland next week to celebrate my birthday and just kind of enjoy some time off. And we've done a run of episodes coinciding with my Disney trips in the past on Disney Plus's Behind the Attraction series. Back in episode, let's see, like episodes 88 we did Jungle Cruise, Haunted Mansion, and Star Tours. Episode 107 we did one Tower of Terror, Space Mountain, and Castles. Episode 116 was the Disneyland Hotel and It's a Small World. And then episode 132 was Trains, Trams, and Monorails, and the Hall of Presents episodes of season 1 of Behind the Attraction. And they ended up coming out with a season 2. So that's what we're doing today. We're doing, this is part 5 of our Behind the Attraction run of things. And today we're going to be talking about the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in that particular episode of Behind the Attraction. So a little bit of the history lesson on it. Oh, and as is par for the course with these episodes, it's just me. It's just going to be a quick little solo episode here where I run through kind of the Disney Plus episode and kind of talk about some of the my thoughts and takeaways from it, as well as my relationship to the rides itself. Our history lesson here, the Behind the Attraction series was originally released season 1 in 2 phases. We had the first few episodes went up in July of 2021, followed by episodes 6 through 10 in August of 2021, and then a six episode season 2 released on Disney Plus in November of 2023, November 1st, 2023. This episode in particular has a runtime of 50 minutes, and because they delved a little bit deeper into the episodes here in season 2, that's why I'm doing like a solo episode of that D Plus show for a singular episode of Behind the Attraction, whereas in the past I've done 2 or 3 episodes per D Plus episode. In the Disney Plus docu-series timeline of things, we had Renovations in April of 2023, followed by Matilda's The World at Our Feet, April 26th, Ed Sheeran, The Sum of It All on May 3rd, Animals Up Close with Bertie Gregory came out September 13th of last year, Behind the Attraction Season 2 here came out November 1st last year, followed by this year's A Real Bug's Life on January 24th and Choir on January 31st, 2024. Notably, this is one of only 3 series listed in the docu-series original programming block that I'm pulling from like the Disney Plus original programming Wikipedia page at least, that has a second season. The other 2 being The World According to Jeff Goldblum and Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom. Though there are a couple series that are listed as renewed on the Wikipedia page there, including Chris Hemsworth, or Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, and A Real Bug's Life getting a second season. So we will see what happens on that front. However, I believe also, I think The World According to Jeff Goldblum is one of those that like got the chopping block and basically got axed and isn't on Disney Plus anymore because of BS tax reasons. So, that's kind of lame and all. Just double checking that as I talk here. So let me vamp here for a second. World According... Yep, no results of World According to Jeff Goldblum. So yeah, that's just one of those dumb things that one in particular was like a launch thing for Disney Plus. I remember watching a couple episodes of that back when Disney Plus launched in 2019. And so yeah, there you go. Anyway, our roll call here, as is the case with all of these Behind the Attraction things, and this continues being the case here, the director of this episode is Brian Volkweiss, who's done a lot of documentaries as well as comedy specials going back to 2017, including collaborations with Kevin Smith, Joel McHale, Lavelle Crawford, Larry the Cable Guy, He's also the director of the Toys That Made Us and the Movies That Made Us series, I believe on Netflix. So if the vibe of these feels like the vibe of those, there's a reason. Same key voice behind them both. Also of note, Dwayne Johnson continues here as a producer of this series. If you recall from a couple years ago, one of the original episodes of this was the Jungle Cruise that coincided with the Jungle Cruise film coming out. So I believe that's why Dwayne Johnson and Seven Bucks Productions are on here as producer. And we also continue here in season 2 with Paget Brewster as the narrator of the series, who's probably best known from Criminal Minds. I always remember her from from the later seasons of Community, but she was also a notable voice in the DuckTales reboot. And of course, we also have interviews from tons of Imagineers over the course of the episode/series. So yeah, diving into the trivia / just kind of my takeaways here from this episode on Pirates of the Caribbean. I like the history that we find out kind of the original idea as Walt Disney was looking for something to fill out this new New Orleans Square kind of vibe he wanted to introduce into the park. Originally, the idea was like we would like have a wax museum kind of experience where you'd go through and like meet wax museum or wax figures of the big notable pirates of the day. But then they talk about how basically when they kind of detour and do the 1964-65 World's Fair, that idea ends up becoming very outdated as you'd had stuff like It's a Small World and Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln kind of innovating river rides and audio animatronics. So they basically end up kind of deciding to make this new pirates themed thing, kind of combination of both of those ideas. Some of the notable Imagineers they bring in to work on this, Mark Davis, who of course has notoriously been one of those early Imagineers that helped bring levity and humor into a lot of rides at the parks, including like he does like the Jungle Cruise revamp. We talked about it back in that episode. He brought some humor and levity to would later bring into the Haunted Mansion ideas and stuff like that. And here his animations and his designs are kind of all over the ride of the original Pirates, with a lot of his imagery and drawings kind of just being transposed right into audio animatronic form. We also have Claude Coates here as he's kind of billed as the layout man / set designer for the ride. So he does a lot of kind of the big, here's the setting and here's what that's going to look like. The episode talks about the practicality of using the waterfalls at the beginning of the ride after you go through like the little bayou section, being practical in a sense of getting the audience, getting the riders out of the Disneyland berm, which is basically the original kind of layout and kind of the original borders of the park. Basically, they take people under the berm into the ride show house room, or the ride showroom, which is outside of Disneyland. They talk about like you're going on this exciting waterfall ride. You don't know that you're going under the train and going into the parking lot or something like that. I think they also talk about / will come up in a future episode of season 2, talking about like the Indiana Jones ride. That's the first one I remember actively noticing that and realizing that as a teenager going to Disneyland, being like, wow, we've been walking a long way. There's no way we're still like in the park or, proper kind of thing. Let's see other notes I have. Oh, we also have, I love this episode. Peppers in throughout. And this is where I kind of took the note. We see shot images of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, off in the dark without water at times. So just getting to see kind of what it looks like in that vibe is one of those, like, I'm a sucker for like pictures of Space Mountain with the lights on and stuff like that. Just kind of the behind the scenes, like, here's the experience you don't see when you're, when we're presenting this, in the parks kind of setting. They touch on the idea that, going from Great Moments with Minister Lincoln, where they had one audio animatronic that could break down and often did, for Pirates of the Caribbean, they have 75 plus pirates and villagers scattered around that area, as well as 53 animals, and like animal animatronics. So they talk about Bob Gurr kind of working with a team to really start standardizing, developing standard parts back in the day because of pirates, to be able to, mix and match and be able to design a whole bunch of stuff without needing to custom design each particular audio animatronic, and then basically start from scratch each time. Another key figure of this ride was Ex Atencio, who worked on the story and script for the ride, and basically ends up writing A Pirate's Life for Me, because he was like, yeah, I think we need a song, at this part. And Walt Disney, like, they talk about, he figured, oh, the Sherman Brothers, who had done a lot of the other songs kind of up to that point, would be, key people to go ahead and write that song. And Walt was like, no, go ahead and write it. So that's how we get Yo Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me. I believe he also went on to do Grim Grinning Ghosts for the Haunted Mansion ride. So, it definitely put him on the map in terms of Disney songs. We have one of the last notable names of the original ride here, Alice Davis, Mark Davis's wife, ends up being the costume designer for the ride. And they tell a fun little anecdote where she said, hey, it'll be, there's going to be a lot of like, oil and moving parts and stuff like that. So these outfits, these costumes on these pirates are probably going to get ruined pretty quickly. It'll be just as easy for us to do like, backup duplicate costumes. And whoever like executives were over her were basically saying like, no, we don't have time. We don't have the budget. Just do the one. She ends up doing the second one anyway, which comes in handy because, a month or so into the ride, they'd have a little bit of a fire and would need replacement costumes. And because she had that foresight and forethinking to already create the duplicate costumes, the backup costumes, they were, she tells a little anecdote that they were basically only down for a day and were able to get, back up and running with the new set of costumes pretty quickly. She also kind of went into this having done the costumes for It's a Small World and having seen kind of there all of the moving parts and the wear and tear that puts on the costume. So she was definitely coming at this from like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Trust me. Speaking of the fire, they talk about the idea of the kind of one of the later scenes of the original ride, where the town kind of starts bursting in flames. How are we going to set this on fire? How are we going to do that? The Anaheim Fire Department's not going to want us using open fires, and all that kind of stuff. And so they bring in E.L. Gracie, who again would go on to do a lot of the effects of the Haunted Mansion. He's kind of the magic man. And he came up with a very simple, just take a cloth, take a red light shining up at it and a fan blowing it and causing it to shimmer and flicker, and boom, there's your fire effect that sits in the ride to this day. Very simple solution to the concerns and the practicality of what they needed. New Orleans Square and the Pirates Ride had a pretty hefty price tag to them, so it was very nice that they became the must-see attraction. So much so that when Disney World opened a few years later without Pirates of the Caribbean, patrons were like, but we want to go on Pirates, and everybody on the Disney World side was like, well, we're not going to do a Pirates thing here. It makes no sense to put a Pirates ride here in the Caribbean. Like, it's novel over on the West Coast, but here we want to give something, on the East Coast that you don't have on the East Coast. So we're going to really go all in on this Western theme, which would go on to become kind of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. But everybody was clamoring and knew and like Pirates was the must-see thing. So they kind of abandoned a lot of those plans and focus on and fast track getting a Pirates of the Caribbean ride in the Disney World park. Then we would get they gloss over kind of Tokyo Disneyland gets like the best of both versions, because the water tables in Disney World kind of prevent the waterfall effect, and kind of the dips that you have out of necessity in Disneyland. They can't go down because they'd be going under the floodplains and whatever in Florida, so that it's just kind of all at the same level in Florida. Tokyo Disneyland has a drop, and then kind of continues on with the Disney World version of the ride from there. And then eventually we would get the Euro Disney / Disneyland Paris version of the ride, in, I want to say it would have been the 90s. That gets the advancements in technology that they've seen over the prior 30 years, leading up to a kind of the big showpiece of that one is they get audio animatronics pirates that can sword fight. They also note that this was the first time they added a lady swashbuckler into the mix, lady pirate into the mix. And then Curse of the Black Pearl, the movie comes along, changes everything, and suddenly you have people who are introduced to the Pirates of the Caribbean idea through the movies, and people are going on the rides and being like, but where's Jack Sparrow? Where's Captain Barbossa? Where's all that stuff? So they, as Disney has often and always done, they start kind of revamping the ride to, update it and accommodate and tweak. So they start adding Jack Sparrow into the ride and the story of the ride. And also they touch on here at this point, I remember being like a big, hullabaloo in the Disney circles and sacrilege and stuff, but they update the ride to reflect the times, and they talk about the idea of, hey, maybe we shouldn't have men chasing women and ogling women, and maybe we definitely shouldn't be selling women. Sure, it might be period appropriate, but do we really need to reflect that? No. So they start changing, instead of chasing women, the women are now holding trays of food, so the men are chasing the food. And we have Red, who is like the notorious, big, voluptuous kind of quote unquote wench on sale in the auction scene. She's basically transformed into the auctioneer, and they kind of revamp that portion of the ride to kind of make her the fast talking, let me do the selling kind of thing, give her more of a position of power. And then we get the Shanghai Disney version of the ride after that park is announced. And not only is it going to get a ride, it's going to get a Pirates of the Caribbean inspired land all into itself, given the that it's coming out at the height / fervor of the films. We are introduced to kind of the team of Imagineers that work on that project. Luke Maynard, Rick Turner, Hilcia Pena, Amy Jupiter, and Bill George. They touch on ideas about taking the ride to the bottom of the ocean. They use the new technology of the time, like moving eye point, where projectors are mapped to basically change based on where you are in the ride. The best example I can think of that I've seen of this is the Harry Potter ride at Disney World. I went on that a few years back, and I remember kind of that experience of being in the car and you're in this big dome where projection's happening, and you're the projection and your perspective is changing as you in your car are moving along through the track. And they also talk about having a new ride system where that moving eye point thing only works if you can, pinpoint accuracy, know where the car is going to be at any portion of the ride. And in the traditional Pirates of the Caribbean, where it's just kind of being pushed by water, that doesn't work. So the ride system that they have here is boats are still floating in the water, but they are very specifically controlled by a track using magnets to kind of keep them in position underneath the water. So the rider sees that they're floating through water, but underneath that there is a specific car and track that is kind of guiding the boat above. So cool little thing there. They show off little images and stuff of kind of as they built it up, they would build like a scale model of the ride where instead of riding along in a boat, you're sitting in an office chair and kind of being pushed around the track to kind of start to be able to visualize everything. I thought that was really cool. They go all in on this idea of a chicken gag during a fight between Davy Jones and Captain Jack, where, you know, they want a chicken to kind of like be thrown out and kind of and whatnot, and just a little comic gag. They can't afford to do it via CG though, so they just bring in like live chickens, direct the live chickens, and then composite them into the shot, and that works. And then they touch on the like critical moment of when they were going to add water to the ride, because at that point you're basically done kind of doing anything under the water level. And they touch on this idea of this beautiful moment they had in this little ceremony they put together where they brought water from each of the other rides, each of their Pirates rides around the world, and kind of like poured it in as like a dedication as to kick off this one. Is lovely. And there's just like nice little moments where as the kind of the key Imagineers who are talking about this like get choked up in like that being just this beautiful moment of connecting the past and present of the lineage of this ride and stuff. But they do, you know, it was not without its problems. They touch on the idea that as they, you know, started adding some boats into the track, they would see and they would notice that like the water would start to be kind of pretty shallow at the beginning of the ride, and by the end it'd be a little overflowing and stuff. What they end up realizing is, well, yeah, we're like the ride system is effectively acting as a pump and it's pushing water further down the track. So they needed to end up basically building a makeshift pump to bring it back around to the beginning of the ride to kind of even things out and even out the flow. But they figured it out, and they went from having kind of the soft open like makeshift solution to having a proper pumping system kind of hidden back through the back rooms of the attraction. So cool stuff there. They also touch on real quick the Eye of the Storm stunt show that is in this Shanghai Disney Pirates Land that really showcases as its centerpiece a stunt featuring a wind tunnel where performers are just basically free falling in a wind tunnel as part of the attraction, spinning around, doing all sorts of little tricks and stuff with that. So it was a cool little visual that we get to see. And then they, you know, this big attraction, Pirates of the Caribbean Battle for the Sunken Treasure, has been like the big showcase evolution of the original Pirates ride, which has and includes its own little Easter eggs and callbacks to the original ride. Like if you take the original ride, the iconic trio of prisoners trying to get the key from the dog. There's a version of that where the prisoners and a dog are all just sitting there as skeletons, and that they never got out kind of vibes. So cute little visual there. And then they kind of wrap up with the idea that, you know, talking about, we don't know what Walt would think of like the evolution of this ride. Unfortunately, we also don't really know what he thought of the original ride, because while he was very involved and very hands-on in the development of the original Pirates of the Caribbean, he did end up passing away a few months before it would get to open. Like they talk about how he was around, he was still open, he was able to be there for the opening of New Orleans Square, but he passed away a few months before the actual opening in 1967 of the Pirates ride itself. But he did get to go on similar to that like mock-up where they were, you know, riding through the ride on, you know, rolling chairs and stuff. Were able to get him in a boat and kind of like pull him along the ride to show him like this is what it would be before they put all the water and all that kind of stuff. So he did get to see a very late stage mock-up of it before he would sadly pass away too young. And they kind of talk in that same lineage of one of them talks about getting to show down the line, take Mark and Alice Davis to Euro Disney, Disneyland Paris, and show them that version of Pirates of the Caribbean with the swashbuckling animatronic pirates, and Mark Davis just being over the moon at that and thinking that was the coolest thing and the thing we always wanted kind of stuff. And then lastly, I just want to shout out, they have a nice little dedication card to Raleigh Crump, who passed away in March of 2023, about a year ago as of this recording, just a little over a year ago. I want to say March 12th. So it was a nice little send off to him. He was very heavily featured in the first season episodes, and I think he might even pop up in second season interviews and stuff, either in archive footage or something like that. But he seemed, by all accounts, a charming little man. So I like that little, in honorarium of him. So yeah, that's this episode of Behind the Attraction. It gets a nice little A from me. I always love kind of these deep dives into the history of these Disneyland things, because I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. First and foremost, I'll shout out the other season 2 episodes that focus on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, Indiana Jones, the food, Epcot, and the nighttime spectaculars. I have gone ahead and watched all of those and thoroughly enjoyed them. And we'll kind of have them in my back pocket if I need them for future episodes of that D Plus show here. The actual suggestions that Disney Plus will give you are The Imagineering Story, Disney Insider, The Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom, One Day at Disney, One Day at Disney Shorts, Disney's Fairy Tale Weddings Special, Disney Parks Sunrise Series, and Decorating Disney Holiday Magic. And I will also shout out, as I often do in these, Defunct Land as a YouTube channel. They also do a bunch of great deep dives into Disney past and attractions and whatnot, stuff like that. So shout out to all of that. Extracurriculars, what else are you watching on Disney Plus? Haven't really watched anything else on Disney Plus, but I believe our plan is, I'm recording this, a few hours after the Eras Tour Taylor's version dropped on Disney Plus. So we talked about that maybe being this week's episode, and we'll just push the episode a day. We'll all sit down and watch that. But it ends up being 3.5 hours, so we did not do that. We're going to try and find time, each of us independently, to kind of sit down and watch it for next week's episode. So stay tuned for that and our thoughts on that concert series, episode, whatever it is. So yeah, that's going to do it for that D Plus show. Thank you for joining me to hear my thoughts here on Behind the Attraction, Pirates of the Caribbean. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. The thing I will shout out, go check out our ongoing Tuesday and Thursday series on Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth as I continue to play through that game. This past week, centered on a lot of Dondoku Island, where I went to Dondoku Island in the Tuesday episode, and then in the Thursday episode picked up basically at the tail end of my 20 hours on Dondoku Island and proceeded and continued through the story. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, review, subscribe, rate, all that fun stuff. Share it with your friends. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other. Class dismissed, and yo ho, a pirate's life for me.